Guys, this is the Peak Performance 40 podcast. This is number 7, so we're starting to rack them up pretty quickly now. I've got today longtime friend James Breese from Strength Matters and Cricket Matters. James, why don't you just give us a quick intro as to who you are and what you do now?
Hey guys, I'm a Welshman living in Cardiff now. I did spend some time in Australia, down in the wonderful place of Melbourne for a long time. But no, living in Cardiff now. I've got 2 companies, Strength Matters, which specialise in helping fit pros, do their marketing in terms of website design, SEO, and like Google Ads. But the big thing we do, and my hobby and my passion, because I play a lot of cricket, is a side project of mine, which has turned into a full-blown business, Cricket Matters, which is all about helping cricketers perform better and doing that in terms of cricket coaching, their strength and conditioning, mobility, nutrition, that type of thing. So that's the area where we're focusing on now. And I enjoy it the most because I play a lot myself, so I'm learning at the same process. And I can give my perspective as a playing over 40 cricketer, national over 40s cricketer now, I'll hasten to add. So I can tie it into helping these guys perform better when they're over 40, because guess what? Things change. As you told me many years ago when I first met you, things start to change. I never believed you, but now I do.
Yeah. Well, so your background, because I've obviously known you for quite some time. I was thinking before we jumped on, I think 2010 or 2011 we met. So it's been 13, 14 years. You've got quite an interesting background. So in terms of cricket, you played at quite a high level when you were younger?
Yep. So I was playing through the pathway, so which here in Wales, which is like trying to make it pro. So I never made it pro, but I was in the system and I almost did. And a number of reasons, probably talent was one of them, but also lack of information and knowledge. I wish I knew now what I knew back 20 years ago, like we all probably say, right, when we do that sort of thing. But yeah, I was probably not fit enough. I'm more prone to injury back then because I was just doing the usual stuff. There was no S&C. There was no training guidelines. You just
that
throw
was
some weights around.
The cricket era you're talking about, like the David Boone era.
Yes, David Boone.
Where they drank a plane dry crossing the water to get to England to play the Ashes. I mean, what kind of pro athlete is drinking a plane dry? And yet that was a common sort of story. You got Shane Warne smoking cigarettes on the balcony in between, like very different era for cricket back then.
100%. What's even funny though, there's a guy called Matthew Maynard. He's a Welsh cricketing legend and played for England. He was one of the coaches at England, and I know him well in Cardiff. But one of the conversations we had a few months ago, and it was through one of my friends who's the physio at Glamorgan at the moment, and she asked him, and they had tried to have this balance between can the players currently smoke in uniform and in the changing room. This is like the last couple of years, right? And they had to get a trade-off, because they were thinking about banning alcohol during games and also cigarettes, because apparently cigarettes help them calm their nerves, was what the argument was, right? But they came...
help them focus as well. I mean, nicotine's a
stimulant.
Yeah.
That was the argument from the coaches, but then the S&C and the health professionals were like, no, we can't have this. But the compromise was they could all have a Guinness at the end of the day because it has the same nutritional value as a salad, quote, unquote, some of the coaches. So that was the conversation. And even today, we're talking about levels of nutrition and strength and conditioning at the highest levels of cricket. It's got a long way to catch up still, but it always makes me laugh.
How is a Guinness like a bag of spinach? I'm a little bit lost here as to,
Me too.
How that happens.
Ours is not the reason why. I just laughed when I heard that story and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But again, tells you where cricket has also got a long way to go in their professionalism, because it's still carrying over that hangover from the David Boone, the Shane Warne era, and people's mindset. They still think they can just turn up and play, whereas it's a lot harder on the body these days.
And I imagine club cricket everywhere is not too different to here, where club cricket here seems more like an excuse to get together with some people and have some beers. You know, like I used to have a chef worked for me when I had a cafe, and he would always go, "Oh, like it's so rough going to cricket on Tuesday night because I have to drink a 6-pack." I'm like, I'm not sure how those two things fit together. Yes, don't turn up for work on Wednesday hungover because I'm paying you to be a certain way. But his belief about cricket was, I have to go drink a 6-pack just to go to training.
Well, and that's what it is. So you've got so many players, such a big sport in terms of peak playing levels, and the ability levels are staggering. And there's a big disparity between the top and the bottom. But I'd say about 3/4 of club playing cricketers around the world, they just rock up on the Saturday. They don't train. They just rock up on the Saturday. But they all have one thing in common, as they want to be the hero of that match. They want to be the game winner. They want to. It's like golf when they hit that one drive out of like 60 shots they play that day. They want to have that one shot they've smashed it over the boundary for six, or to win the game, or they have that run out, or they take that wicket, or whatever it is to get involved. They want to do that. So secretly, deep down, they have this desire to want to perform well, but they just don't know how to do it or have the willpower maybe to do it. And that's at the lower levels. But as you're getting higher and higher and higher, there's a lot of kids and athletes between 14, 15, 16 who do have aspirations of playing professionally. And that is a lot of where the work we're doing now is those guys. Plus, on the other end of the spectrum, Masters cricket, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, over 70s World Cups are happening. And these guys are going to tour the world and play
What's
cricket
the
again.
run up for an over 70s fast bowler look like? I have to ask.
It is so slow. Like, it's quite funny. I've seen a few people play, and it is like some of the seam bowlers are now like more like little dibbly dobbly spinners. They lob it up like hand grenades now and stuff like that. But do you know what? It's great because it keeps them healthy and active,
Yeah.
and they're all wanting to perform. They all have that performance mindset, so they're starting to train and stuff. The retired guys. So it's interesting seeing this, and me where I'm doing it in the over 40s, and we had the World Cup in Cape Town earlier this year. Like, it does give me extra impetus to go and perform better. So I trained harder for it. But what I saw was my teammates who'd never really trained in fitness before, they lost a couple of kilos or like 4 or 5 kilos in ready for it. So it's giving them impetus. So I think it's absolutely wonderful, the
I feel
two ends
as
of the
well.
spectrum.
I mean, the fitness thing, I've worked with a few people who've played Masters hockey. So
Mm.
have gone to like national level tournaments. And obviously, hockey's very competitive in Australia. And they train for months leading up to it. And what they find is, one of them in particular, I remember she was a little bit lower skill. She was a relatively new player. But by the end of the tournament, she was on the field the most because all the others were falling to pieces. And that's the other thing that people forget in a tournament situation. It's no good you can just play one game on a Saturday like you normally do. You're playing game after game after game, 5, 6 days in a row at those big competitions. And you've got to be able to hold your stuff together for the entire period of time. And that's definitely something I think where fitness comes into things. I want to just backtrack a
Huge.
bit because you mentioned mindset. So your background, and because again, I know you spent a little bit of time doing some tactical stuff with police. Do you feel that? I mean, combat. I feel whether it's military, that kind of special law enforcement side, or martial arts, where you are having to focus in what are potentially dangerous situations. Do you feel that's giving you an edge for the tactical mindset side of helping people perform for these cricket matches?
Yeah, massively. And in fact, I've just come back prior to this podcast. I had a 2-hour cricket coaching session with an ex-professional player today, and the conversation we were having was that his words were, "Breezy, there's something different we're looking with you. You're more like us." And what he means was, we're more like a pro player, how we think and how we train. I go, well, yeah, I know I'm not a pro player, but I have that high performance mindset. Whereas if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. And it means getting comfortable with the basics. So I had 2 hours of practicing three things: my head position, my hand position going back when the ball comes down, and the grip on my bottom hand being lighter. Three things in 2 hours, right? And most people, when you're doing coaching, get bored. Let's take nutrition. People get bored. They get bored with their training plan, stuff like that. But what you see and learn from the top guys, the top cricket coaches, but not just coaches, these are players who've got some of the best averages in the game, who've done at the highest level. We expect they say the same thing: get comfortable with boredom. And it's about doing the basics right. And that sort of mindset has definitely helped me. That was the same in policing, Krav Maga. It's the basics right, because you use the basics 99% of the time. So for us, it's
I
going
think
for
from
a
a
walk.
coaching perspective, that's really important too. I mean, I can't count the number of times I've watched newer trainers work with people and they'll give them a correction. The person doesn't do the thing they've said, and then they give them another one, another one, and another one. And I've just had this week is the 12th week I've been working with someone on their diet. I've been working on one thing that entire time, and it's taken them 10 and a half weeks to get that one thing to the point where we're actually going, okay, so now that's good. Now we can start talking about some extra stuff. But 12 weeks, basically 3 months, focused on one particular aspect of diet, which is just protein intake, which is usually the hardest thing for most people anyway. But you know, how many other people would you have seen in that period of time going, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and
Agreed.
now the person's just confused. Like, how are they going to
Exactly.
improve when you give them 20 different cues? They can't even remember the first one.
Yep, exactly. And I see it in the world of cricket coaches. So what I'm saying now, so again, coming from that background of what we've done for years and trained simple things done well, but also from my military, from the law enforcement background coming here. And again, it was the same thing when we were doing those things. It was this driving was my speciality. If I'm talking about things like this, it was like high performance driving, and it's the basics done well. I'll give you an example of the basics done well was if you got a stick shift car, right? It's if you're a right hand drive when you're changing the gear into first and second, your thumb always has to be down, right? Left down, back down here. When you're going third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, thumb is always up because in high pressure situations, it's easy for gears to slip. So they drill that into you at the highest possible level, like thumb up, thumb down in those positions, right, till you get it right. So people comment all the time, well, why are you doing that? Because I don't know, it's second nature now. But I had 3 weeks of a ruler slapped on my hand if I didn't get that right from my old school driver. Simple thing done right because when it matters, little things like that. It's the same thing with cricket coaching. They try and do 4, 5, 6, 7 different exercises around different shots, playing them out the park because it's fun and sexy. But it's never going to happen in a game because they haven't got the basics of head position, hand position, and bottom hand, like we just did for 2 hours just right now. And we can carry that over. I know we're talking about cricket, which for some people will just turn off because it's boring as hell, right? But we can get super geeky on this stuff. But it's the same thing with nutrition. Like when we're talking about, you said it right, you get the protein right, everything else falls into place, right? Because everyone argues over how much carbs, how much fats. Well, why don't we cut those things out? Let's get the protein bit right, and those two will sort themselves out, right?
It's actually, I mean, I can't remember the last time that I did anything about fats and carbs with people unless they said I want to look a particular way. Like it's a wedding or something like that. Total calories, protein grams, everything else doesn't matter. And people need to stop worrying about like the ratio and like oh, and I'm not sure I'm getting enough polyunsaturated fat. And so
Exactly.
now with the cricket guys, so I feel like we've established like your credentials. We know you know what you're talking about.
Just about.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, I mean, cricket, as like you said, there's a big disparity between the top guys and everybody else, and it's such a broad range as well. As people are like coming into the system, so to speak, have you seen, like these are the most common problems? Like obviously from a training perspective, the biggest problem most people have is they overeat. That's it. And if you can fix that, you're going to make really good things happen for them from a health perspective. What's the top few problems from a cricket perspective that you see people have?
Yeah, sure. So I'm assuming non-technical now in terms of cricket coaching, as in more fitness and stuff. Would you
No,
say,
let's
or
do
you?
technical. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's. I'll start with technical. Let's talk about batting. It comes with head position,
Yeah.
and like the head, like in martial arts, in some respects, and like restraining people, if you don't control the head, everything else falls away. So the number one fault. I say I'm more of a specialist batting coach.
Yeah.
I bowl a little bit well, but my specialty is batting because I bat a lot. And I can relate more to the guys doing this. So when you're watching the ball come towards you, you've got to have your head in line with the ball. So imagine this is the ball in my hand here now. You've got to have your head dead center here. So if the ball comes this way, you're following, and you've got to keep this alignment. Whereas most people tip over to the side. So when they tip over to the side, they lose their horizon. So they
Yeah.
can't track the ball as easy. And they fall
Yeah.
over and then they cause all sorts of issues. So the
You've got
number.
to maintain. I mean, from motorbike racing, same thing. So you imagine you tip to the bike, and if you stay with the bike, your head goes like this, but actually you're supposed to be doing this
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's weird in your brain. So the very, very top guys can do it, but you won't see club racers able to maintain, like the arc around the corner with their head like this. You'll actually have to see them do this.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how our brains
It's
wired.
it's crazy, and I've never thought about it because you see it now. I see the top pros, like the Ironman TT was recently, right? And you see those guys go around the corners and stuff. You always see the same thing. Their head is up like that as they're going around. I've never thought of it like that before.
There's a little bit also because they're on a regular racetrack. There's only 12 to 15 corners to learn, and they're always exactly the same. The Isle of Man's like 150 corners or something. And so what you're actually seeing is they're looking to get a better view. So like, you imagine if you're a cat, your view of the world is pretty small, right? Because you're
Yeah,
very close to the ground. Whereas if you're a giraffe, your view is pretty expansive, right? So if I've got my head down low, it's very difficult to see much. If I just pop my head up slightly, that couple of inches of extra gives
Yeah,
me a lot more visual information. But it's
interesting.
such a, I mean, I think the visual stuff, and you're right, in martial arts and you look at motorbike racing, driving, I can think of so many things where just having your head in the right position is a tremendous change. Like how
Huge.
are you going to play the sport if you can't see the ball?
Yep. Well, that leads on to point number two, right? Not seeing the ball. So when they're batting. So I'm going to stick on batting here. So it's interesting. So you ask most cricket players if they get out, they can't remember the ball that's been bowled that's got them out because
Really?
they weren't looking at the ball properly. They weren't focused enough. And this kind of leads down the line. So the first number we say is you want to fix head position and make sure it's tracking the ball in alignment. The next thing you want to talk about is are they watching and seeing the ball? Because you more often than not. So if you imagine like a cricket bowler, like if you're, or even baseball pitchers, right? Imagine my hand here on the camera. You can see it now. So you have these two things, right? Ball, right? So a cricket ball here now, in terms of here, you have focus, right? You have what we call a hard focus, where you're looking at the ball directly. There's this thing called soft focus, where you're looking at the square around the ball, the area around it, okay? So a lot of people try and watch the ball intently. But what happens is if I go like this, by my head and comes forward, you lose sight of the ball for a second, you lose it altogether. But if I take my hand here and you're still looking at the square shape in the middle here, you're more likely to pick it up quicker as well. So it's all about where they're looking at the ball to begin with. So everyone wants to go for technique and the hands back position and stuff like that now. But if you don't fix how you're looking and watching the ball and tracking it, you're always going to have problems with your head, right? And that becomes time and time again the focus here. So the head position, how you track the ball, which then leads into something in terms of like fitness and nutrition. The number one problem I see with most of the guys who are playing cricket is they're chronically dehydrated. Chronically
Really?
dehydrated. They're not drinking enough, right? Which then leads to beers at the end of the game, okay? But I've
Well,
spoken
and you
to,
compound the issue through using a diuretic. Yeah.
yeah, right? So you see all this now building up. So you see, so if you're chronically dehydrated, you don't make good decisions. Cricket, and particularly batting, is you have one chance. If you don't make a good decision each ball, then you're screwed. It's as simple as that. And if you're playing in heat, and even in the UK, which is only 20 degrees, and that's hot, right? Hour after hour building
Yeah,
up.
that's more than hot enough to dehydrate over, like standing outside all day. Yeah.
Exactly. And they think a little glass of squash, it's like 15 overs is enough, but they'll have maybe a coffee in the morning and they'll have no water. They'll have nothing else here now. And of course, particularly the older guys, they have problems absorbing the water. So they're just running to the toilet all the time because when they do drink, it's coming here now. So like what we try and get them to do is to help with mental focus and clarity, to help them make better decisions, is we want to help them hydrate better. So it's just a simple thing like in the morning, have half a liter, three quarters or a bottle with electrolytes in it. Just have that to start
Is
before
that
you go
just
and play.
touching on electrolytes? Is that one, like, again, like with food, everyone tries to make it more complicated. Now, I get people all the time like collagen and electrolytes and, like
Yeah.
this other stuff. I'm like, no, just drink some water. Like it doesn't need to be complicated. Just start with something basic and see how you go. And for most people, like you said, that chronic dehydration, I mean, it's not days, it's weeks for the tissues to hydrate properly afterwards. Chris McCormack, who was a world Ironman champion, so both
Hmm.
Olympic distance and Ironman world champion multiple times, he said to me, he reckons it's 3 weeks to get the body to fully hydrate. When you take someone who's not drinking enough water, and so like that thing that people do where they go, I'm drinking a gallon of water a day, and I'll be hydrated in a couple of days. No, that's like a month of doing that. And what you'll actually notice is if you keep your water consumption constant, obviously at the start you start going to the toilet a lot, but keep your
Yep.
your consumption constant, and that actually starts coming down because suddenly your body's not peeing all that water out. It's actually starting to hold on to more and more of it.
I've never heard the 3 to 4 week sort of mentality, but that makes a lot of sense on so many different levels. But yeah, you're right. Like I agree with you. If they haven't got electrolytes, I don't want to buy them. Fine, just drink water. Let's keep it basic. I always advocate it because I feel a lot of them can't absorb it, and it does help when in playing performance. Now, if I wanted to if there's someone more advanced, let's say in terms of their nutrition, then I would look at them to have some form of carbohydrate drink mixed in with the electrolytes to help the extra calories to keep them going. But that's level ninja shit, right? If I'm
Have
talking
you,
about that here.
just talking about that, have you had anyone experiment yet with ketone bodies?
No, I haven't had anyone actually. I haven't explored it myself. How do you find that?
We'll have to talk off air. It's not really a cricket discussion, but it's a lot of the Tour de France teams are using them now, and there's two big things I see. So one, there's no studies yet to show performance is better. So it's not making performance better. What it is doing, and this is particularly relevant for a multi-day tournament setup, or even if you're playing 2 days back to back, is that activity depresses appetite. It keeps appetite the same. So actually, what would happen then is
Wow.
you could have a better lunch, which means you can have a smaller dinner, which means you'll sleep better, which means you'll recover better, and you'll be sharper the next day.
Wow.
So it's not actually necessarily about more performance today. It's about being able to eat and sleep better afterwards, so you're in better shape for the following day or days, which you can see obviously for like a Tour de France kind of thing. Everyone's performance is obviously going like this. If I can just make that a little bit flatter, my guy's
Yeah.
going to be in much better shape at the end of it because they're able to take 400 calories more a day, I think is what the research comes out at, which is a huge amount more food.
The thing of the top cricketers, even the top club cricketers, they're playing 4 or 5 times a week, right? And that's Saturday, Sunday, back-to-back days. You're talking 100 overs in the field, batting, bowling, both times here, and that's the biggest thing they do. So that leads on from the hydration side of things to we're finding them completely undernourished. Or what they're doing is then you're undernourished throughout the day, and sometimes if they're tired, they may not eat enough later on at night to compensate for that, or they'll have their pizza, they'll have their burgers, their beers to go over the top, and they overconsume of I say the wrong types of food, but they feel shitty the next day. They're not
Yeah.
like
And they sleep
refueling.
bad because they're full.
Yep. It's all that tiny thing. So we then have to educate them on what to have for breakfast. And again, it's just trying to keep it simple. The easiest thing we try and say to guys, look, you got to find something you enjoy doing. We recommend oatmeal porridge. It's like just to get some carbs, and you like whole grains, just that in there with you. Have some protein powder if you want to. When we're talking to them to help them out, but just super simple. But if you haven't got that, if you don't put cool, that's not. Just find something to eat that's going to sustain you for a bit longer, and then have something lighter before. So have the big meal 4 hours beforehand, ideally. Then have something like snack wise before you go out to play. Then, if we're talking high level guys, then have that carb drink throughout the thing, not just your drink of squash to replenish and keep the calories up. But yeah, they're not nourishing themselves enough throughout state of play from start to finish, and then they're not recovering enough the next day after that. So it's crazy. If anything, I would like say for cricketers who come in to work with us, yeah, they want technical stuff, but actually the simplest things to improve their performance is just basic nutrition stuff. That's what we're seeing in terms of
Yeah.
performance. Because
Well,
again, the big
let's be honest, the best thing most people can do for their performance is just go to bed earlier. Like the number of people who are getting like 5 to 6 hours sleep and thinking they're crushing it. Like, no, mate, go get 8 to 9. Particularly guys in
Mhm.
my age group who want to train hard. You need 8+ hours sleep a night, and suddenly you'll see it's boom like this, and it's more potent than. I'm not saying like it's better than steroids or anything, but like when I see guys talking about TRT and like all this other stuff, like let's just get the sleep and the food sorted out, you're probably going to change your mind maybe about some of those things that you think you must have, because like you said, the basics is super powerful. And I think I just want to point this out to people because they would have missed it. That pro guy you were talking about where you worked on 3 things for 2 hours,
Mhm.
that's such a pro mindset. Like, because a pro is okay to do that.
Mhm.
Whereas you get a mid-level person and they're like, oh no, I got this. I did 3 reps. I'm good. Let's move on. And did 3 reps of this other thing and move on. And they're trying to collect techniques. And what they should be trying to
Yep.
do is master a technique.
Yep. And because the one technique can lead to it's like a domino effect once you get certain things right. And it was just phenomenal. But yeah, on so many different levels now. So if you talk about the other thing was sleep, right? Talking with cricketers, and not just pro cricketers, who it's understandable because if it's their work, it's their aspirations to play it like for international level, understandable. They're going to have nerves. So, but even club cricketers, it's like an unwritten law, unwritten rule. They all are nervous or really shitting themselves the night before a game. So they actually don't get sleep. They don't sleep well. Whether they want to go out and drink, some of the guys will go out for a few beers with their mates, that's fine. But there's lots of other guys who really want to perform well, but put so much pressure on themselves to perform the next day, even though it's club cricket. They're waking up anxious in the middle of the night. So we're prescribing them like basic meditation stuff to do, like to help them, not just on one night, it's like throughout the week. So like the Headspace app, we're referring so many people to go and start using it. Because again, it comes down to your mindset. Cricket's like 90% mental. It's all about that right decision, the right time, and being focused on the one ball coming down to you. But they think so much, oh, what if I do this? What if I do this? No, it clouds your judgment, clouds your mindset. It's about that one ball, having a clear, balanced mind. And if you're not sleeping, you're not hydrated, you're not nourished, it all compounds to making poorer decisions. And you see so many club cricketers, particularly when they're batting, they get out when they score 20 and 30. Anyone can score 20 and 30, right, quickly, but not everyone can make 50s and score 100s. And the difference between those guys between 20s who focus and concentration. So it's the little things. Like I'd argue that these are the basics you've got to get right. The S&C stuff, the strength and conditioning, the training stuff. Don't get me, I love doing that stuff. We love talking about this stuff all the time. But if in terms of cricketing performance, I'd almost want to get these things helped around here because they're quick wins, and they can do them alongside it. And the training can be part of it if you're with me. So it's all these things compounding. But at the end of the day, if people want to come to us to play better cricket, well, as a cricketer myself, I've got to help them find the ways to do it and get the quick wins to get them to buy into what we're doing. And they go, holy shit, I trust Breezy. He knows his stuff. Cool, let's do some really funky stuff now that you may have thought before we can't really do, like some breathing stuff or whatever you want to do. But you've got to earn the right to get into there to help them do it. And that's kind of our approach.
With the sleep thing, so obviously I have a lot of customers who have events in Sunday morning or something. Mm-hmm. And they are the same. Everyone wants to, no one signs up for something wanting to do poorly. Everyone wants to, and it doesn't mean that they need to win, but they need a result that makes them proud of how well they did. And the actual mechanics of one poor night of sleep. So if I have a poor night of sleep last night, for instance, before this, my body will actually be better this morning, believe it or not, because I've got adrenaline and cortisol propping me up. Because as far as my body's concerned, I was in a fight or flight situation last night where I was so stressed because a tiger was chasing me, I couldn't sleep, right? And so I've woken up this morning supercharged with these stress hormones to get me through the day and help me fight, basically. Mm-hmm. Now, if you do that multiple nights in a row, so let's say it starts on Wednesday night for a Saturday game, performance is absolutely going to suffer. But I actually have conversations with people now where I deliberately say, hey, I know tomorrow's a big day for you. Don't worry if you don't sleep tonight. It makes no difference to your performance. And letting them know that, hey, it's really normal that you actually have a poor night's sleep tonight. And there are world records that have been set after a poor night of sleep tonight because of what happens hormonally. But the main thing is that lead up to the week.
Yeah.
So don't use the meditation app just the night before. Start
it's the build up throughout the week. Yeah.
So that, like you're making sure you're rested before, because we're pretty sure you're not going to have a good night's sleep the night before. And that's 100% okay.
That's a good way of framing. I've never thought about framing like that, but you're right. It's like you're saying, okay, but like I said, we want to build it up and become a daily habit of just 5-10 minutes. That's all it is. There's a great, the sports concentration, sports focused course that does on Headspace. I'm not affiliated with Headspace, by the way, but there's a really good, like a 10-pack course they do, 10 minutes a day. Exactly, yeah. Right, so you've got that element there, and they focus on that, and it helps them quieten their mind, and it helps them go more balanced, and they walk out into the field going, that's the feeling here. They're not worried, they're just focused on what's going around them. But you're right, telling them not to worry the night before the game actually is a really thing. I'm going to write that down and tell Josh and tell him we're going to start telling the guys here now if they feel like that. So there you go. Cheers. I've learned something today as well.
The lifestyle stuff, I think people really, because when you get into sport generally, obviously quite young, youth saves you from a lot of stuff. And what I've experienced personally is that as I've gotten older, if I'm going to do something, I need to be very professional about it. There are no more loose ends if you want to put in your best effort. Like, you must sleep. You must have your diet nailed down. You must be doing all these little things that you probably didn't need to focus so much on when you were 25 or something. But you get to 40, 45, I'm 53 next month. Like, if you want to do these things well as you get older, there's just no space for mistakes anymore. And the lifestyle stuff, I mean, I tell people all the time, like when you get your sleep and diet properly nailed down, you'll be surprised how little training you actually need to look and feel the way you want to feel. Like it's about half. But until they get there, it's tough to build a tent, like to put a tent on rocky ground, basically. Like you got to clear some space to do the building, and that's what that stuff does.
And just on that same note, let's take the World Cup recently. Wales as a country, when we're playing, because normally England and Wales, but in terms of the Masters Cricket Association, they split England and Wales into two different teams. So we know we're minnows in terms of test playing nations. England, India, they got bigger things. But we kind of spoke about and we said, look, the one thing we can do at our age group is be fitter than the rest of them because they don't move as well in the field. Where they normally would get ones, we would run twos and threes, and it compounds. And like we have a lot of players that equal or slightly better some of the other teams, their technique because their experience, right? We could keep a level playing field because we're fitter than them and we're making better decisions. And you're 100% right. The most important things that I do, right, in terms of me playing now and still playing, because I'm still trying to play with the young guns and prove a point that us oldies can like keep up with the young guns and like can face 80-mile-an-hour bowlers and whatever. It's just like maybe it's an ego thing, maybe it's a like whatever it is. It keeps me young as well to keep me focused on training. But the non-negotiables are sleep. My nutrition has got to be 80-90% on point, right? I've got to hydrate well. And if I don't do my daily mobility and yoga, right, it doesn't have to be yoga, but it's some form of mobility to stretch and move daily, I am screwed. The strength training I've done enough strength training in my lifetime I can just maintain. And during a cricket season right now, that's the least of my concerns. I need to maintain. And if I do it once a week, cool. Twice is a bonus because I'm playing so much. But the other stuff is non-negotiable at my age now to be able to play and perform better. And that's, again, it's not about doing the Olympic lifts. It's not about doing all the stuff you see on the Instagram and TikTok and stuff. It's those basics I find is so key as we get older in terms of sports performance for cricket. Because not only do I feel better for it and day to day make better decisions day to day, but on the field, like I can run circles around them,
Yeah. And I think, the mobility stuff, just for people to give you an example. So normal amount of hip extension. So if I'm running, my thigh has to go past the line of my body behind me. So a normal amount would be 10 to 15 degrees. So if you lie on your stomach and someone lifts your leg up, you should get 10 to 15 degrees of your thigh, heading up like that. Most people have 0 or less than 0. They can't even actually extend their hips to the point where they've got 0 degrees of extension. But you look at a very fast runner like a Usain Bolt, who's got more like 30 degrees. We talked about cars a little bit before, but if you know how horsepower is made in an engine, so like if you can rev a car to 8,000 revs and makes 100 horsepower, if you take it to 16,000 revs, that car will make 200 horsepower. If you double the range, you double the amount of time, basically, you can make power. So if I've got 0 degrees of extension and I can run at X speed, if I get someone to normal to 10 to 15 degrees, they're going to run faster. And if I can really extend that out to 20 plus degrees, I've just given them like more ability to make power in their running stride. And I got to imagine that, you're talking about masters cricketers. When you guys are playing at these big tournaments, so you're playing teams from all around the world, how many guys chase a ball and then look like they've been shot by a sniper because their hamstring or their Achilles gives up?
All the time. You wouldn't believe how much stuff they does. And like one of the things I introduced into the team, not just the 40s, I work with the 40s and 50s as well in terms of development. And, I've introduced them a routine of warming up at the start of the game and stretching at the end of the game. And they do it without fail now because they find that they feel better and recover better. Yeah. It's not rocket science. I've given them a routine of 10 moves at the start to help them do it. And yet, like they could do so much more if they had it. But you're right, I see it all the time. Pulled hammies, pulled calves, pulled quads, pulled groins. If we're looking at, those are the things all the time, let alone the bad backs that they have from all over the place and the shoulder pain, take away that. But all the time you see people turn and sprint for one move. And again, it comes down to basics. More often than not, they haven't slept well the night before. They're poorly hydrated. They don't train. They don't look after themselves. And they get pissed off because they're out for 3 to 4 weeks. But the other thing as well is I'm finding so many cricketers who accept the fact that when they get injured, oh, it's the thing, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks to heal. It's like, no, hang on a second here, right? If you're proactive with some of these things, you can be back within a couple of weeks. Now, if you, I pulled a quad actually about a month ago because I just,
Running with pads on?
it was running without pads on in the field, but it was off the back of a virus. So I had another virus. I was ill, being ill for a couple of weeks, shitty sleep. Like I wasn't feeling great. I was tired,
Was that your
and
18th time getting COVID? I mean, I think
more
you've
than
had
I didn't test
COVID
for it, but probably it
the
was.
most out of anyone I know.
I'm a shit magnet for it. I really am. It's ridiculous. But no, that was the thing. So like it was. I didn't test, so let's assume it was. Who knows? But it was like a strain going around everywhere. But I'm saying it's a virus because I was pretty down. But it was that compounding effect, and then I batted for not long, but long enough to be tired. You with me? And then I got out to field, and it was just that moment I just turned and went, and I was like, oh no, it's just pulled. And then, but within 2 weeks I was back because I focused on nutrition, I focused on massage and rehab, doing the basics well, and getting it moving again, and I'm back playing 2 weeks later.
When
So
you
it's
say your quad, so rectus femoris, I'm guessing.
yeah, rec fem,
Along the
yeah,
quad.
rec fem,
Yeah, so
yep.
high. So that to me says there's a hip flexor issue because rectus femoris will work as a hip flexor when psoas isn't doing its job properly. So just, you need some dead bugs in your training.
Yes, I know. Well, it was even worse than that. So literally, when I got the massage, so here's what I did. So I went to my sports massage therapist. I know Grace, who's a legend, right? She's young, but she's absolutely awesome and switched on. So I said to her, "Let's see what's not working." Guess what wasn't working? My hip flexors, both of them weren't working. So for whatever reason, something had shut down everything that was going on, and it just led to it. And so yeah, it was a nightmare. But it pissed me off. But I missed a recent Wales tournament as well because of it. It was even worse. So it was like done like the week before that. So, but anyway, but the point is, in there, a lot of people same thing with injuries. They're not proactive with the basics to help them get better. They just
A pro
accept it.
mindset again. I mean, a pro athlete doesn't willingly sit on the sideline. The pro athlete wants to compete. And I mean, I tell people all the time, so like pros go to bed, pros eat right, they make sure they do their accessory training. But when they get injured, they don't let it fester. They don't let what should be just a short term thing, like you said, a couple of weeks, turn
Hmm.
into something they're still talking about. Like, I was in really good shape in 2022 until I pulled my hammy. And
Yeah.
mate, that's 2 years ago. You shouldn't be talking about that still. That should be like long gone in history. Like you should be back to normal by now, and they don't go get it treated. And it's just, I understand for the US guys because the rules of physiotherapy are so weird in the US compared
Yeah.
to everywhere else. You just go to the physiotherapist. The US, you've got to get a doctor's prescription, and then like anyway. But for those of us who live in regular countries, just go to a physio, get it
Yeah.
sorted.
I know. I'll give a great example. Now, my mate Hubby, right? He pulled his hamstring in May, right? End of May, he pulled his hamstring. He's not playing yet today. He tried to go back like 6 weeks later. It still hadn't gone right. And it was just like this consistent thing. Why? Because I suggested he goes and sees a physio. He did. He saw him once, and then that's it. He's let it just trying to wait and heal out. So again, it's not. It is his fault, but there's a lack of education for people to learn how to manage it. And I think it's learning that there's a multiple of factors that help you assist to get better. And like I said, we're fortunate enough to have made fitness our passion, our lifestyle, and we're really into it. But what we're trying to do now is obviously help educate people to go, no, there's a better way of doing things and a different mindset when it comes to that word again, mindset, to help you train better, but also recover better, not just in terms of like post training, but in terms of injury as well. And I think that's where a lot of people need to, just not accept, but what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe just change their attitude towards it. I think.
Yeah. What about with training? I mean, like when I look at cricket, I see a fast bowler's under quite a lot of stress. I mean, the point where they deliver the ball, like there's a lot of force going into a locked out front
Hmm.
leg. They're sideways. I understand a lot of bowlers have back problems long term, but when I look at batting as well, there's a lot of time spent sideways in batting. What are you guys doing to? I mean, there's obviously there's some ways you can counter that in training. So I'm kind of curious as to how you're keeping these guys healthy, particularly like the bowlers. I think the bowling is probably much more stressful on the body than
Yeah.
batting, right?
It's huge. It's a big, big issue in fast bowling. Like, I haven't got all the data, but you see so many stress factors from the pros. I'd love to know what they're doing. at the highest level to get to that level of stress fractures. There's never been so many stress fractures in the last 10 years than ever
Really?
before. So 20, 30 years ago, there was no stress fractures. The difference was back
You're
then from
talking
what
like in
was,
the lumbar spine, I'm guessing?
yeah, lumbar
Yep.
spine. So that's what we're seeing. So what the history says is that fast bowlers back in the day bowled a lot more, right? They were bowling a lot more. They spent a lot less time in the weight room. Whereas now they're getting bigger, they're getting bulkier, and maybe there's more force going through it, who knows, but there's less bowling volume happening at the same time. Now, what we know from speaking to Mike Boyle and Eric Cressy and all these other guys here is that when they're in season, we don't want to break them. So we've got to be really mindful. So the number one thing that we've done is that we've taken the barbell out of pretty much all their training, right? Straight away. Particularly the older athletes, they don't need it, right? Strong enough. There's a point where strong is strong enough. And
Well, I mean, the
what we
ball's
do
not very heavy. How strong do you need to be to move a tiny little ball? Yeah.
exactly, right? And so what we're seeing, a lot of the youngsters are getting caught up in TikTok and seeing bodybuilders and how they want to get big and they look good for the beach. We all did back in the day, right? If we're talking about it, like we all want to look good for the beach back then. But in terms of athletic cricketers, so if we load a barbell on their back, it compresses everything. Like their shoulders get depressed down.
Yeah.
If you try and bowl or throw fast with say I always give this example, like take your shoulder up by your ear and like get really tense and tight. Now try to throw the ball, right? You look like an absolute idiot. But that's just an over exaggeration of like, well, if you got tight, shoulders that don't move, like I'm bulky and big and free, it just doesn't happen. So you put me onto this many years ago, where you had the height in centimeters minus 100 gives you a rough idea, right? Well, we looked at it into cricketers, right? So the formula is at professional levels, right? The cricketer's height and weight formulas, your height in centimeters minus 105 for men, minus 107 for women. And that was all the data we looked at across here, roughly correlated it, put it into AI. That came out going, yeah, this is what the data and trends show. So the thing we see with fast bowlers is we look at their weight because if they're too big and bulky and overweight, but just also over fat, right? It's a high risk of injury straight away. To get the fastest bowlers in the world are not big and bulky. Right? The guys who bowl 90 mile an hour plus are whispery thin and they fit that mold. Right? It's about being quick. It's like being like a sprinter, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? Because they go sprinting fast and snap.
And even, I mean, showing my age, back in the Lily days.
Yes. Yeah.
There was another Australian bowler, Jeff Thompson.
Yep. Legends.
What made him a standout was a very unusual action. And what I've heard from people I've met through FMS who are high-level cricket people here was that he was about the only bowler at the time who wasn't in pain constantly. Like all the other guys with a more regular action were suffering. And Tomo, with his quite strange, like sideways windmill sort of thing that he did.
Full action, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, he had obviously figured out a way to do it pain-free for him, but no one else could bowl that way. So, like he was obviously quite an unusual individual, but it's interesting that as volume comes down, their ability to withstand it decreases. And I wonder whether you can see from there's an AFL study that shows the length of pre-season seriously decreases the risk of running injuries during the season. So, like and a standard like club pre-season might be 3 weeks or something. But if you can double that to 6 weeks, you significantly reduce the risk of run-related injuries in season. And I wonder whether pre-season for bowlers, if you extended it slightly and concentrated on what would be like base building. So we're just going to do like tempo bowling. You're going to do lots and lots of reps at 60 to 70% and see actually if that changes things like it does in every other sport.
Yep. No, I'm fully on board with that. I think that's the same thing. Now, we go back to strength because, again, it comes down to movement quality first. And that's what we're seeing with all the bowlers. They have zero hip mobility. They have zero shoulder mobility. Every cricketer's shoulder is jacked up to high hell in here. Yeah, jacked up to high because it's all gunky and tight in here now. If anything, we want to get them to have the teres minor, the major, all this whole area here is just super tight and wound down. And we know as Chinese medicine calls it, the 4 knots: 2 shoulders, 2 hips, opposite correlation. So bowling, right arm shoulder, left hip, right? So you're seeing this correlation. If you've got issues in that sling, it's a massive issue. So what we're trying to educate the guys on, because they're seeing the training plans and they're seeing the S&C guys wanting to lift heavy. They're all trying to get them to do Olympic lifts. I'm like going, why are they doing Olympic lifts? They haven't got technique, right? They're lifting really poorly and their shoulders are fragile.
Well, they must be, I mean, for someone who's playing a lopsided sport, I can't imagine they're lifting symmetrically anyway.
No.
I mean, we actually watched last night. Obviously, the Olympics is finished, but we've got all the replays because of the package that we bought. And we were watching some of the weightlifting yesterday, and it was like men's 102 kilo class. And even at that level, guys who are competing for medals, you can see as they approach their limit, suddenly the bar's not like this, the bar's like this.
Yeah.
Just like tiny little asymmetry. And that's for someone who's trained specifically for it.
Exactly.
And is at the highest level. And now you're going to get someone who's 40 years old who's spent their entire life playing like this effectively, and you're going to ask him to do a symmetrical lift. I can't see that's going to be very successful, to be honest.
Exactly. So when we come back to the basics for let's just take fast bowlers because they're the most injury prone, right? So what we're seeing at a consistent level is that they don't have basic strength standards. Okay, and I'll talk about them in a second. And they can't move well, right? So when we talk basic strength, right, we're talking about, can they hold a 2-minute plank? No, right? They can't do that. They're just literally, their core is just shattered when it comes. We ask them, can they hang from a bar for 60 seconds? FMS standard 101 when we're doing grip test. So they can't even hang from a bar from 60 seconds. So if you want to see other stuff, well, great. But if we don't own the basics of core control, basic muscular endurance and basic grip strength, well, how's everything else going to pan out? So those are just 2 mini tests.
Interesting, because a lot of people would tell you, you don't want to do long-term core strength tests. And I remember when I was doing SEAL Fit, and I actually spoke to a couple of Navy SEALs, and they said, yeah, we generally do like 12 to 20-minute planks. And I'm like, what? And they said, yeah, you'll just go like side, front, side, just constantly like a minute, just round and round and round for the whole time. And I'm like, why would you do that? And they said, well, if you're going to carry a heavy pack for 8 hours, you're going to want your core to be stable for more than 30 seconds or something, right? Like the only way. And so if you're going to play a game that requires you to be in the field all day, you're probably going to want things to be lined up and stable for a long period of time. So is that what drove you to the 2-minute test?
Well, it just from Stuart McGill 101, we had a look at that as a basic. We use that as a basic, like everyday person type of test to look at here now. But then there's a second core test we do because sometimes people can cheat that 2-minute plank test. The one we do afterwards is it's a moving plank. It's a basic crawl test. We call it the box crawl test. So they put a kettlebell or like a whatever in the middle here now, and you crawl forwards, backwards, sideways, backwards to the start, but then you change direction and go the other way. And we want to see how long they can do that for. Because A, it's testing the brain and challenging the brain in different directions here. But we're looking at a movement pattern and putting the core under some strain, like a similar gait as if they're running here, right? They can't do that for more than a couple of minutes. We want to see them be able to do it for 5 minutes. Now, again, Tim Anderson 101, if he can do it for 10 minutes, and he says he sees people change their lives. But we're seeing people can't do it for less than 90 seconds on average.
You and I talking about the guy who was the All Black strength coach a few years ago, and he said their warm-up was basically like banded box crawls.
Let go. Yep, exactly. It was.
Just hits everything, and they're warm. Let's go.
Yep. That was it. It was literally that was like definitely still doing it now. I did a podcast with him a couple of years ago, but I'll have to catch up with him actually. He's a great guy, but same sort of thing with his guys. I remember he said to me once that he took all the barbells away from the weight room because they were all getting hurt because they were all trying to compete with each other. So when he had dumbbells and stuff like that, they can go as heavy as they want to. It's not going to cause an issue. There was no issue. So it was just like being sensible by taking away something that they weren't able to. And that was the idea of started with cricket stuff. It's like, well, yeah, hang on a second. Let's get the basics right. And definitely don't want to overload them in season because their body's already beaten down. They need to recover in between games. But we're talking off season, it's where we're trying to get basic strength levels. Again, it comes back to about seal fit. One of the things I love was they talk about how over 1.5 time for deadlift, if you get to 1.5 times body weight for 5 reps, right, your correlation of passing the seals thing it diminishes over that. So why go any heavier when you can just main it there? We don't care about that. We want to see a well-rounded athlete. We're like,
The only
that's
the
a
only
good
two
point.
things, and I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday. The only two things that there's no tail off for. So as you said, like as you get stronger, your chance of passing goes up, but then suddenly you reach a tipping point and your chance comes down because maybe you're too stiff. You've trained that thing
Exactly.
at the exclusion of something else. The only two things are power. So a standing broad jump, the
Mm-hmm.
further you go, the better, full stop.
Yep.
Like it more distance always equals more chance of passing. And the second one was your run time.
Yeah.
So the faster
Exactly.
you can run, the greater your chance of passing. And those are the only two things. Everything else, push-ups, pull-ups, bench press, deadlift, all these things that people think are really important. Actually, there's a midpoint where your chances are really good. Don't be on either side, but only those things. So power and VO2 max were the greatest correlators of passing seal selection.
Yep, and that's the same thing we see. So we've taken the exact same study. I remember us talking about years ago the same sort of thing. I think you sent it to me actually originally, but once you saw that, it's the same thing with cricketers. So in cricket, it's the 2K run time trial test, right? They want to see them run 2K in under 8.5 minutes. That's what they call as the test for fitness in cricket, right? They do the yo-yo test and they have the 2K test. Whereas I'm seeing most of the guys trying to do 2K run times. They're not fit enough in the first place. Cricket's an all-day sport. Now, I'm not
If 2K is an all-out effort, then you've got you should have to run further than 2K to train for your 2K run test.
exactly right. So you're seeing this, right? The 2K, I talk about this, they talk about the standards, and a lot of cricketers failing it. So 8:30 is what they want them to do, most of them. 8:30 is not elite. It's not elite, any way,
No,
shape, or
no,
form, right?
4:15. Yeah,
Right. But guess what? Cricket's not a 2K event. The average bowler is running 10 to 15K in a game. Batsmen are doing, if they play alone, 8 to 10K. So the thought process we're going with this is now, look, I'm not saying you should go run marathons because it's really hard on the body. Cricketers don't need to do that. They've got to have a balance of longevity type stuff, health zone 2 stuff, but they've got to also practice the shuttle sprints in between the wickets at the same time too. So what we're trying to say to cricketers now is, look, in the off season, I want to get some miles in your leg, anything between 5 and 15K consistently, right, over a period of time, and then we build shorter as the season as you get closer to the season. In season, I am a big fan of road cycling because the day after the game, they get on the bike. It's low, just zone 2 stuff. Go for a ride. Go nice and. I'm not saying do the Alpe d'Huez, do the Tour de France. I'm saying just go and ride, right? Just go and just get this out of the system to feel better. So we're doing more shuttle work and sprinting, all out sprints. Because I'm a big fan of Tony Holler's feed the cat stuff in season as well. Because you want to get low volume, high intensity sprint work where you feel refreshed to keep that speed going. But you're not doing long volume running in season. It's either bike work or like sprint work, and off season you do it. Is what we're trying to get to.
I want to segue a little. So I had Ian King on, I think, like 2 podcasts ago.
Legend. I haven't heard. I
Yeah,
haven't seen his name for ages.
yeah. Well, because I've got a bit of a relationship with him over a long period of time, like he was happy to jump on, and he's obviously a busy guy, so it was awesome. I got to talk to him for an hour. But he was saying, so the history of the NSCA, so the American Strength and Conditioning Association, was originally the National Strength Coaches Association. So it was a football coaching group. And then as they wanted to grow a little bit and expand like their reach over the industry, they became the Strength and Conditioning Association. But what it basically says is that if you're part of the NSCA, you're basically saying, I believe everyone should train like an American football player because that's the roots. And if we're training like an American football player, most of them are powerlifters in terms of the way they view training, right? In Australia, I would think that while there's definitely that influence because there's a lot of NSCA influence here, there's also a very heavy AFL influence. AFL is probably the biggest driver in
Mm-hmm.
strength and conditioning in Australia. It's certainly where the most money is. In England, do you feel like you guys, a lot of the strength and conditioning information, I would guess it's football or it's rugby based
Rugby.
as the two big sports. And so, like, what you've got is people, like you said, like they're going barbell, barbell, barbell. Well, that to me doesn't make sense for a cricket player, but they're being influenced by like the traditions of strength and conditioning in England.
What I'm seeing now is here in Cardiff, there's a big strength and conditioning university, Cardiff Met, and it's one of the most popular courses, the strength and conditioning courses, right? Where they become sports scientists, they do sports massage and all sorts with it now, and they all come out and they all look the same way. They look like big rugby players, right? Because a lot of the guys do it, they're meatheads, if I'm being brutally honest, and that's what they like doing. So therefore, the science says you must use a barbell. So when I see the Cardiff University boys who I play a lot with, and they're on their special S&C program in the thing here now, they're training like rugby players. They're training for massive size and mass. And the guys who I'm speaking to, most of them are on some of our programs now too, is that, hey, Breezy, look, we're hurting. It hurts. I'm physically hurting. My hips are hurting. My back's hurting. My shoulders are getting tight. And I'm also finding I'm bowling slower. Well, no shit, Sherlock. And it's the conversation. But again, this is where it comes to people who play cricket and don't play cricket. And a lot of the S&Cs, I know for a fact that there's a couple of S&Cs at the very highest level who don't like cricket. I'm not going to name names. I'll tell you off air.
They're involved in strength and conditioning for cricket.
Cricket and don't like cricket, right? I'll tell you off air. I'm not going to tell you on air who they are, but I know for a fact there's like 3 people, right? So if you've got that in mind, but also lack of experience of playing cricket or what it's like, it's like, dude, I'll give you an example. Not just, I scored 100 on Saturday, right? And towards the end of my innings, it was just hot and humid. It was really hot and humid. So at one point, I had like spasms down my forearms. I had like the double claw going on like this. And I had to like drop to the ground and try and stretch it out. But it was just like, well, no, they don't understand that you get this sort of thing by playing cricket, because the forearm, batting over that period of 2.5 hours, holding the bat, gripping it and striking down, it takes a lot on the forearms. You've got to train forearm. Like a climber, you've got to train grip and forearm strength, right? And endurance-based stuff for a batsman. Whereas none of that is touched upon. They don't even touch that sort of stuff.
All right, so you've mentioned hips and shoulders a few times. One of the big things you touched on as well was sort of getting rid of the barbell. But what are the, not that there's a top 3 for anything, but if you're giving some advice to people about how to make sure hips and shoulders keep working well so they can keep playing pain-free for longer, what are the top few choices you're making for them in training?
Good question. So let's start with shoulders. I think you've got to do a lot of, here we go. You put me on the spot here now with this one, but I'd say massage first of all. I don't people ignore this. Let's get in there. Let's mobilize the scap.
Actual massage, not just use a gun on it, right?
No, exactly. Go find a really good sports massage therapist and get them to work in not just your back or your traps and stuff. Get them in pec minor, pec major, get into the teres minor, the teres major, infraspinatus, all this area here. Get into it as best as you can.
And then just in terms of training, once you've loosened all that stuff up.
Yeah, sorry, I was waiting for you to press stop because of the dog bark in the background. That's what I was doing here now. No, so once you've loosened all that up stuff here now, it sounds crazy, but it's simple stuff like kettlebell arm bars. Like we're talking about arm bars, the regular arm bars, crooked arm bars. And my favorite one is from an old FMS video. Is it Jeff? Not Jeff Newport. Who's the other one? Who's the other crazy RKC guy they had? Jeff O'Connor.
Jeff O'Connor and Brandon Hetzler.
Yeah, so Jeff O'Connor had a really good one where you drop the kettlebell behind here to open up this side of here. So you go into a Turkish get-up position like this. So you're down on your arm here now, but then you rotate and bring the arm down. So it just opens up this whole side here and stretch. And you feel the weight. The kettlebell pulls down. You need nothing more than 8 kilo, but it just opens up this whole area, into the scapula, into the thoracic here, and it just feels great. So you come out of it going, God, it feels absolutely amazing. So in terms of shoulders, yeah, there's loads of other sweeping arm drills you can do, but I'd say the it's not heavy, the kettlebell armbar stuff using a heavy implement, which I'm saying heavy is between 8 to 12 kilos for regular people, and spending time under that is an absolute game changer. Alongside intentional massage and movement around those areas, and not just focusing on the front and back. So that's in terms of like the shoulders. In terms of hip, again, you want to find a good sports massage therapist and get in around here. So not just you want to get into the diaphragm, get into the hip flexors, into the psoas, go into the TFL. So you would get into the glutes, that whole trunk, right? That area around here. You want to release all these areas here to allow the hips here to, into the rec femur and down into the adductors, a huge part actually. So of what's going here, that whole thing gets so tight as a cricketer, as a every sort of people here now. You want to release it, but then when we release it, then we start doing basic mobility stuff. So again, little things like 90-90 moves, but dynamic movements. Trying again, I always say to the guys, you need a bit of WD-40 to hinge this out, right? So let's just start doing the basics. Now, most people don't need advanced stuff. This is stuff that's been around for ages. Let's keep to the basics. Let's look at basic 90-90 movements. Let's look at the basic frog movements, active frog type movements. You don't need anything fancy. It's just keep it basic. Now, we can all argue over which is the best exercise, but sometimes for most guys over 40, doing something is better than nothing at all.
Yeah. I feel like if I look at like windmill or bent press, just talking kettlebells,
yeah,
if you had someone that could do them, they would prove that they had adequate hip and thoracic mobility. Probably not getting many 40-year-old guys to a bent press just off the bat. I mean, that's like a little bit of specialized training to get there. But, things like windmill from half kneeling and things like that, and that thread the needle move, I can see them being, as part of the warm-up being incredibly useful.
Well, definitely. The thread and needle, the book work, where we literally lie on your side in the fetus position and you're going around the side. Good old classic, the FMS sweep movements. That, when you're lying on the side like in almost like a pretzel. It's hard to do it in a podcast.
Yeah, but they've removed them now. So
are they really?
They in an effort to make them simpler to use.
Yeah.
Because I think people were struggling to figure out where to go with what exercises. But I mean, the very first FMS I went to, which was CKFMS, was actually a lot of stuff where you touched the other person. And then from a legality point of view, obviously, because they're coming in as physiotherapists, they're allowed to touch people.
Yeah.
And they realized that in the US, trainers can't touch their clients in a lot of states. So because it counts as manual therapy. So they had to remove a lot of these really powerful partner drills that were in there.
Oh, wow.
And, over the time, and so I don't work for them anymore, but the last update I went to, I think I ticked them off a little bit because they'd spent all this time like, oh, we've got like new FMS, like look at all this new stuff we've got. I remember we were doing one thing and I just finished like a 200-hour yoga teacher's course. And I just went, oh, that's yoga. And Lee Burton was like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, that thing there, and I even named it in Sanskrit, whatever it was. I'm like, that's that to that. The breathing you're talking about, that's definitely yoga. And he's like, yeah, well, like that's good to know. I'm like, but so you're saying you've invented this thing that's been around for 8,000 years. So I feel like they haven't released any of that stuff yet.
That's interesting.
And I feel like the reason they haven't is because they're trying to figure out a way to market that what they're really doing is yoga. And I've said to people for a long time, like if you just got good range of motion and then strength trained through a full range of motion, you won't need any of the other stuff. And people are happy to do the strength training part and they won't do the mobility flexibility part.
Yeah.
They won't devote enough time to it.
No, it is incredible. You're right. And yoga makes a massive, I'm talking now like, there was because I follow the stuff I do with yoga. So I put Apple Fitness on. I follow like whoever's on the Apple Fitness thing. I want to do that day because I switch off. One of the worst things I find as a trainer is you can sometimes overthink your own training. Whereas I like the feeling of being an athlete, where I just like to listen, like going for coaching this afternoon. I love it because it's like I can just switch off, listen, and back and forth. So sometimes I do specific mobility because I know I need to do it. Sometimes I just do 30 minutes of Apple Fitness yoga because I just switch off. I don't care what it is. I'm just switching off.
Have you used Dustin Brown on Apple?
I have used. I remember Dustin from I've seen him a few times in there, so it's quite interesting seeing him.
I mean, obviously, I introduced you to him, but he was also my teacher for the 200-hour yoga thing. So, there was as soon as I finished, actually, he jetted off overseas to do all the filming for that. So he was away for like a year straight after I finished my teacher training. Yeah. But so there you go. I mean, it's funny how small the world really is digitally.
Exactly. Going back to you talking about strength and conditioning for cricketers and like the strength stuff for cricketers, like we're more focused on quality of movement. Now, once they get to certain strength levels, like I said to you, like with that deadlift stuff, one of the other things we like to see is like a 50% body weight goblet squat where they can do 25 reps in with that.
Ridiculous.
That's it. Like if they can do that, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like it's they're beasts. They don't need to do anything else. I mean, just focus on single work, maintain that sort of work, and then it's the power work. It's like teaching them good skills with medicine ball rotations and slams. It's like because you want to, particularly cricketers now, it's all the rage is power hitting. So
Yeah.
it's like teaching that movement. With that drive,
Do you,
which you need from the shoulder hip separations.
do you spend time doing the other side as well? I always find,
Yes,
like when
more
people are in a
so.
single side sport, they're only worried about like their playing side, and there's just as much gain to be made actually doing the reverse.
100%. No, we make sure that both sides are equal. But the other thing we do as well is everyone in cricket, obviously, throwing is a big part of the game. Bowling is a big part of the game, right? They all do it one way. No one ever focuses on going backwards, right? So that's the other thing we do. We get like a tennis ball, and in the warm-up drills we're doing with some of our guys when I'm coaching people, like as well as doing that stuff, we want to get them throwing fast backwards just to change that momentum, go around. So there's I say heavy ball, like a cricket ball is fairly light. It hurts if you hit it hard, but like a weighted ball, nothing more than like two or 3 kilos, and they're slamming him against the wall behind. But it's that same half kneeling position where they want to go behind the same way because no one trains them going backwards. So
Yeah.
you've got to control the reverse as well as going forwards because you need the stabilizers, right? So
Well,
it's
and the if you've got 100 units of, we'll say, throwing force, but you've only got 70 units of braking force, which is going the other way, you're only throwing at 70. So
yep.
actually, and while so throwing is a little bit different to like punching in the air because there's like the object flies out of your hand, the brain understands that
Mm-hmm.
and allows you to accelerate through the movement, but you're still limited to a large extent by the antagonist. So if you can increase antagonist strength, you'll actually increase your output on the throw or the hit or whatever it happens to be.
Interesting. I didn't know that. But say similar with some of the med ball throws and stuff. So you see a lot of people all going the one way, right? This way here, left, right, and left. You don't see many people rotating behind like this. So what we try and get to do is like we get like a wall behind us. So we get the ball. So yeah, we do like 5 or 6, mostly between 5 to 8 reps against the wall on coming this way. That's the power forcing it here now. But when you try and get the guys to rotate and actually use the wall behind you to bounce off to your partner drill, they find they can't rotate the other way. They struggle to go the other way. So we're trying to maintain full rotation and movements here to generate this going forward. So that's all. Again, it comes down to more health as much as power generation in terms
Yeah,
of movement.
yeah.
It
Well,
comes
I
down
mean,
to that.
you're going to spend a lot more time not playing cricket in life than you are playing cricket. It's the same for any sport. And I feel like, middle-aged guys who start really focusing on things, and running's probably the easiest example, but they just run, 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 run. Like, even if you're running a lot, you're running 10 or 12 hours a week. Like, what
Yep.
about the other 150 hours in the week or
Yep.
whatever? Like, and you're not going to be a competitive runner probably at 60 plus. So you've got another 20 years of life to think about afterwards. Don't cripple yourself with like one thing in a straight line. Like, make sure you can go both ways, make sure you can turn, you know what I mean? Like make
Yep.
sure you've got those other skills. And so it's interesting that you're talking about balancing guys out. I imagine they come to you just going like, oh no, I just want to work on this over and over and over. I got to think that the guys who've been doing that are pretty broken when they turn
Yeah.
up.
Oh, the classic one is, I'm see on camera now, is imagine I'm a right arm bowler, right? This shoulder is so far internally rotated like this, it's up towards the thing here. They're walking around like Quasimodo, right? And they think, yeah, I want to bowl fast. And it's like, well, no, you're not going to be able to bowl fast because the technique to get you to bowl fast is you've got to have a high eye release point up here. But if you haven't got the movement, right? If you can't get you got the overhead extension, you haven't got that in place. Well, how do you expect to bowl? How do you expect to bowl if you can't brace and because when a fast bowler's front leg hits the ground at the point of delivery, you're talking 7 8 times body weight going through that leg, depending on what's going on. And if you can't brake and you can't use that force properly and stabilize everything going on here now, what's going to happen to you? No wonder you're going to break down. No wonder your back's going to blow. No wonder
Yeah.
like whatever happens here. So it's the education part saying, look, most coaches will want to work on technique with you, but our philosophy is we're looking at your physical preparation first. If you are not able to get into position or physically prepared well, I can do all the technique stuff in the world. It's just like hammering a freaking bent nail. It ain't going to go anywhere. So we're trying to change that perception. Like the physical preparation needs to come first to get you into the position ready enough so we can do the technical work with you. But most coaches, not through any fault of their own, is they're not used to the physical side of things. We've got the 20, 30 years longer in some cases with you, but how we've got that experience behind us. Whereas these coaches don't even look at it like that. And that's what we're trying to, that's a battle we're trying to do. And also the mentality of the players themselves. They've so used to the expectations of, hey, I'm going to come and work with you for an hour. Therefore, we're going to be in the nets, hit balls, bowl balls. No. Right? No, it's not going to happen. That. See, but there's a little fight. And this is why when we do in-person stuff, we combine it with online, because they do this stuff away from the in-person because they don't want to do it that much in person. Therefore, we give them a week's build-up to do it to come to the next session. So it's a hybrid approach. Is what we're trying to do.
You've got a 12-week like online training plan, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of people come to us first of all for what we call an initial analysis. So they come to us wanting cricket coaching. So we say, well, look, you want to see what we're like? Come and do an initial analysis. We'll put you through some strength assessments, some movement assessments, and some cardio assessments, right? Just simple, and some health screens. Those are the four quadrants: health, movement, strength, and cardio. The four quadrants to look at. Do them, which no other coach is doing, and then give us some video analysis of you doing your sport, i.e. practicing batting or bowling, so we can have a look at it. So we will then give them video feedback and a video call to talk about what we see. And most of the time go, oh, we've never thought about this before. I'll go, well, there you go. This is why you've come to us in the first place. This is what you need to do. Would you like some help with that? And now some people think, no, I don't want to do a 12-week program. I'd rather do a couple of sessions here and there. But they all tend to come to the 12-week plan, because a 12-week plan is where we're going from state A to state B. So every cricketer wants to perform better, right? However, it depends on how you're going to get there. Some people are in better physical shape than others. Some people, as simple as this, just need some weight loss. Like the best way to perform better is weight loss.
I think that's the number one thing most over 40s should be doing. Like whether it's health or performance, like, people want to talk about like, oh, well, we need strength and aerobic fitness and we need VO2 max, and just tell them to lose weight. Like, I guarantee if they lose weight, you've automatically made everything else better from a performance perspective, but you've also increased their chance of not having a heart attack. Like, that's got to be the number one thing.
It is. It's the same. Like we had many years ago when we were training a lot of cyclists, like amateur cyclists. They come to us and say, "Hey, James, I want to perform. I want to ride better. I want to be better on my bike. I want to be able to keep with the peloton with the guys here." Cool. So you'd weigh them and you'd see how much they weigh. Again, if we're using our formula of like height in centimeters minus 100, for cricketers it's minus 105. For Tour de France cyclists, it's minus 112. So for me being 173 centimeters, it's 61 kilos. That is insane. I weigh 70 kilos right now, right? That's another 9 kilos of somewhere to lose. That is mental. I'm too short as well, because the average height is like 182 or whatever it is.
So, and it's actually because there's three distinctions as well. So there's, for those guys, there's what would be a GC rider versus a pure climber versus a sprinter. Basically, the three distinctions, and the sprinters may be closer to what you would think of as a normal weight, but the GC and climber guys, you're right. I mean, they are pretty frail, particularly in the upper body.
Yeah, it's all lower body. But then, so again, we have that conversation with the guys and going, look, okay, you want to perform better. So we just very quickly, I can do it in my head now. Look, okay, if they say to me they're 180 centimeters tall and I'm 95 kilos, that tells me they're about 15 kilos overweight, right? And they want to do the sexy super program that's going to get them fitter. They'll buy the new bike.
I could probably lose like 3 to 5 kilo. You're like, okay, it's 15. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is and it becomes a bit of reality to them. So again, the same. A lot of the older cricketers who work with us, that is a big wake up call for them. And we're seeing a lot of them who want to go and play internationally at Masters, who are close to 20 kilos overweight.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they have all sorts of other health issues.
Yeah. And, I imagine those guys in a multi-day format as well just fall to pieces.
Guess what happens? Guess what we have to have in Masters cricket on the side of the pitch constantly? A defib, because there's heart attacks.
I shouldn't laugh.
No, but it's true. Like you wouldn't believe how many people have collapsed in the heart. Now the over 50s are going to Sri Lanka next February to play for the over 50s World Cup. So I'm helping them with their training. So the thing I'm trying to get across to them is this: is guys, you can go and train all you want to. It's hot as hell, humid as hell, right? And if you're not cardiovascularly fit enough, right, what's going to happen? Your
Huge stress.
risk of heart attack is going to go up.
Yeah,
So the number one thing you guys need to do next year is come home safe.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Australia, so there's a place in Papua New Guinea called the Kokoda Track, which is a really significant World War II battle. It's basically what stopped the Japanese colonizing Australia. And when you go and do it as a tourist, on the first day you walk up into the mountains. Like the mountains are relatively high, like they're over 2,500 meters. There's definitely some
Mm,
elevation problems, but it's really hot. And the first day you're in the sun for the whole day, and there are no roads. There's no way to get help in there. So if you suffer, you're probably going to die. And as you walk along, there are graves along the ground. You don't see them later in the track, but that first day you walk past a lot. And it's exactly that. It's out of shape people who are middle aged, who have gone into a hot, stressful environment, probably carrying a little bit of weight as well, which is something they maybe haven't really practiced beforehand, and they fall over. So, I mean, you definitely see that hot environment really changes things dramatically for people.
but also, like, the biggest, that was the big wake up call for me was like when I was going into cricket again. So, like, I've always been around 73, 74 kilos, and I thought that was normal, that was fine. But when I dropped down to the World Cup to 68 kilos, right, I went, no, I'm going to drop down to here now. My God, I felt better, like in everything I was doing. But it wasn't just that. The thing that got me the most was I do a fair bit of snowboarding. So I love snowboarding. I love trying not to break myself or kill myself snowboarding, but I like doing little tricks and stuff and playing on the side. I have never ridden so well on my snowboard ever for like the last 10 years because I was just 6 kilos lighter than what I normally was, right?
Yeah,
And I
it's amazing.
really, you know, it felt I could wait going all day long, I could recover faster, and it's just like a wake call. So now, again, in season, I know my weight will go up a couple of kilos. So I'm up to 71 kilos at the moment, which I know come end of the season, I'm going to try and bring down again to 68, 69 because in season it's hard to do it. You want more food, you've got to recover better. You know,
Yeah.
there's more.
Well, and
You know,
you
just
can't train as much because your body's fatigued. You got to let it rest.
exactly. Yeah. So I'm okay with a couple of kilos. You know, as the season goes on, but knowing that at the end of the season, what we say to our athletes, well, where are you at now? Are you 10 kilos heavier, or are you just a couple of kilos? Cool. First thing we want to do at postseason is recover, rest, assess, and then we see what we do. So most of the guys, guess what they're going on come September, October? Weight loss programs
Yeah.
because they need to drop their weight down if they want to perform again next year.
I mean, it's and again, like I always feel like that's the number. Everyone's worried about the wrong stuff. They should be worried
Yeah,
about, like, am I healthy first, and then we can start worrying about the other stuff. James, I have to cut you off. I have to get
it's
going.
all right.
We've got some stuff we have to do. Where can people find you?
The best place to go is if you want to find me on Instagram, find me at James Breese. That's the best way to do it. Or on Twitter at _ James Breese, where I just text the message like loads of stuff about crikey, cricket, football, anything random. Abusing Aussies every now and then.
And where can people find this 12-week program for cricket?
Yeah, if it, literally best thing to go check out cricketmatters.com. Go to cricketmatters.com, type it into Google. Cricket, you'll find a lot of stuff we talk about is health and fitness related, all for cricketers. So if you are a cricketer, check it out. It may help you improve your game. Like I said, it's basically similar to what Andrew says most of the time. Because guess what, he has helped me over the years get my stuff straight in my training. So
Well,
kudos
I
to
mean,
Andrew.
cricket's not my thing though. But I mean, I feel like I was saying this yesterday. So this conversation I had with someone yesterday was um, quite long and covered a lot of topics. But if you look at middle-aged guys, and what spurred this particular conversation was I got sent a screenshot of a 51-year-old guy who is an Ironman competitor and has basically been told his heart's struggling. Like he's starting to go through AFib moments. So like like he's at risk of a stroke basically. And he was like, and I've been told to train less and I'm losing fitness and what am I going to do? And I'm like, really? I mean, you're 51. Do you think like Visma's going to call you up tomorrow and ask you to come ride as a sub in the next Tour de France? Like that's not happening. Like you're talking about riding 500 kilometers a week and running up to 80 kilometers a week. Those are big weeks, even if you just separate them. If you put them together, do you even work? Like, are you home at all outside of work? Like, have you seen your kids in the last 2 years? Like, and this guy's worried about like his bike performance. Like, you're 51, mate. Like, whatever outright performance you had is done. Get healthy. Like, don't have a heart attack. That should be number one. And this guy's, he's just focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And, if you could just get people focused on the health side of stuff, I think you haven't
It's
said
not sexy though. It's not sexy.
Well, exactly. There's not much money to be made telling people to drop weight and go to bed early.
No, exactly. We keep trying though. We keep trying.
Yeah. Now, James, thank you again. It's been awesome. It's such a good catch up. Great to see you.
Likewise, man.
For everyone looking for him, Cricket Matters and James Breese at Instagram are the places. So thank you again.
Cheers, guys.